I'm Per Eriksson. So here we are in Sweden. We are at Artipelag, an art museum on the outskirts of the capital Stockholm. There will be an exhibition called Signature Women, and it's about the heritage of the female in art in Sweden. We're in Stockholm, and we are here together with the architect and artist Petra Gipp. And we're here to find out about her way of connecting architect and art. How did it all start? Why did you get interested in architect and art?
One very important role was the place where I grew up, because my parents, they had one hotel and one motel. This motel was more of a big family, because so many guests came, not twice, they stayed for months. So it was very, very interesting to grow up in a space like this. I really understood that this is why I became interested in space. Because for me, it's so much both about the outer space. I think the spaces are even more about our own inner spaces. There's a connection and a sort of trying to bring these spaces together. That is architecture and art for me.
Seeking an education that could develop into a profession. How did you go about to do that?
Actually, I started with figure out if designing clothes was interesting, because I have thinking about this. I mean, now, and it's more or less 30 years ago, and I wonder if that could be something about the skin and how you fold the skin, some sort of a second skin around your body. It wasn't enough, actually. I didn't really like being in that context. I'm not interested in fashion design at all. I started at the KTH in Stockholm, but after 3 weeks I went to art school, and I went deeply into the oil painting. After that year I was still interested in the architecture, so I went back to the school. I think I stayed for 1.5 years, and then I quit again and started at the Nordic photography, the School of Photography. So after that I went back to the KTH, and I think I stayed for half a year. So I went to Copenhagen, actually, and I took my portfolio with me. I made 3 years there and took my diploma there.
You're on a mission as a young architect and artist to find the space you're talking about, the inner and the outer space. Finding your own voice or your own language to be able to be the creative person that you wanted to be. How did you go about to find that voice of your own?
Being close to myself, holding my own hands, as I said once, it's more like have the feeling to what could I say yes to? If I make my own decisions, I can go the whole way through, and then it's possible for me to stay close to my inner voice and to make all these, if it's a project or whatever it is. And then when I figure out that it's possible to do like this, then I can do it once again and once again. So I have to deal with myself and stay quite close.
You have now created your own language and your own voice. You're a very intuitive person, as I understand. You trust yourself all the way. Taking it up to different scales, the scale of a house and the scale of a sculpture, how do you handle that?
First, I have to say that there is no difference between art and architecture for me. That's the same. It's no difference in scale. And for me, it would be very, very interesting to work firstly in a scale 1:1. But mostly it's kind of impossible. So I have to work in smaller castings because I prefer the castings.
Finding your own language and your inner voice, I guess you have to use different kind of tools. Could you explain more about that?
I've been working with the architecture and artistic project for, I think it's 20 years or so. During all these years I've been working with more or less buildings, but buildings in a way that they are more of a sculptural volume. But parallel with these buildings, I have always using some sort of investigations. It has been very, very important to make all these investigations. So it was very interesting because I think it was 5 years ago, there was a publisher. She came to me and she was very interested in making a book about all these projects. I didn't want to make a book with all these pictures because in a way they're two-dimensional. You have to be close to the architecture. It's three-dimensional, it's sculptures. So I thought about it for a couple of days and came back to her and said, I would love to make a book, but I would like to make an investigation in plaster what I actually have been doing for all these years. I could have answered that question like this, but it's not possible because I'm not working with the words, I'm working with the spaces. I got very, very close to these projects and I could figure out that there were more or less 5 elements that I was working with all the time. And it was the passage, it was the shaft, it was the nave, it was the niche and the folding. And these are architectural elements and I put them together in a way. There is the body, there is the scale, there is the skin of the body, the tactility. So among these elements there is the person and there is the narrative of being a human being and getting close to it, to connect to these elements. So that was very interesting. So I made this book. I had Ann Gärdelund, the Swedish poet. She was writing super poetry. For me, it's a way of trying to figure out what am I doing.
There are some interesting pieces here on the table. Are they buildings or are they sculptures?
Well, these are not buildings and these are not sculptures. This is part of the investigation that I talked about earlier from this book. This investigation that was from a funeral building or a service building at the cemetery, where you can figure out the nave and you can also figure out the passage. And all this together became a shaft. So there you can figure out 3 of these elements.
So tell me about the different materials that you are working with.
It's very important that the book, it's not on its own, because there is all these elements, the casted elements, were exhibited at the same time at Liljevalchs, because you cannot understand architecture two-dimensional. You have to be close to it. So that's why it's not only a book or an exhibition, because they are connected. So when I had all these castings, I was trying to figure out how will they be connected to ground. I connected the cardboard with the plaster. It could be quite different from casting to casting. I mean, in this one, this casting was kind of filled up with a cardboard, so it became like something that is very, very fragile, like a skin or a membrane around the cardboard.
Tell me about this piece, this sculpture or building, or...
This is part of the investigation as well. And what will happen with a passage when you make it as long as possible? What will happen when you trying to figure out the elements with the casting? Because you cannot do it as you would like to, because it's too heavy, it's too big. That's why the sizes of these they differ from each other. This one is about the passage that goes from one side to another. But when you get into this passage, you have a closer one at the bottom, and then you have a bigger one or a wider one at the top. So this is both horizontal and it's vertical. So the opening is quite narrow. You get into the passage and then it opens up above you. So then you will go in the narrow part in the passage, close to the walls or close to the materiality. And then there is a way, you dig yourself into this quite heavy piece. And then there is a steep passage down.
And here you also have some interesting pieces.
These 3 sections models were made for the Architecture Biennale in Venice. This is a very interesting project. They have the scale of the space in the main pavilion in Venice. So here you can figure out some sort of scale. They are very, very big. So in the room there were these 3 sections, and these sections are about Leverance. The starting point is 3 chapels of Leverance. So that's very much about 3 buildings. But for me, the buildings are more of the inner spaces. How will you be here in this space with your own body in the landscape that is the huge space, and then you go inside this freestanding canopy that it is, and this is a sort of space where you get ready to go inside the chapel. And when you go outside, you open the door or the porch and you get out in this border space, and you can get ready, prepare yourself to leave the inner space and go outside.
Do you think that there is a specific art profile of Swedish female artists?
No, I don't think so.
If you were to give an advice to a young person that wants to become an artist or an architect like yourself, what would you say?
The most important is to find and follow your own voice.